Hi everyone, it's Kathy for Not Too Shabby, and today I'll be creating a coffee shop scene card using the Let's Do Coffee stamp set. I started out with a piece of pink cardstock that measures 4 by 5 1/4. I used a little bit of pixie spray on the back of my stencil so that it would stick to the cardstock. I used Ranger texture paste and just spread that over my stencil. And I wanted the background to be more of an exposed brick look, so I wasn't trying to get perfect, I wasn't trying to get the texture paste perfectly all over the stencil. I concentrated it mostly towards the top and then let some of it kind of just fade off so it wasn't necessarily a full brick. When you do use stencils with any type of paste, you do want to make sure that you plop them into a little container of water along with your tools or get up and wash them, just so that the texture paste doesn't dry on them, because it's pretty difficult to get it off if it does. So I set that off to the side to dry, and then I stamped the images using My Favorite Things Extreme Black Hybrid ink onto a piece of onto a piece of Cougar Super Smooth cardstock, which is my personal favorite when I'm using my Copic markers. And on the stamp of the little barista, there's a spot on there that's pretty solid, and I didn't want that particular part to stamp solid black, so I just used a very fancy tool called a Q-tip to dab up some of that ink. I had done that in a previous video, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll make sure to link to it at the end of this video. Anyway, moving on to the coloring, I started out by coloring her skin, and I started with E53. Added that in the areas where it would be the darkest, particularly underneath her bangs and around the sides of her face, along the bottom sides of her arms, and then I blended that out with E51. Next, I moved on to her little outfit, and I had originally decided that I was going to have her be wearing a blue blouse with a pink apron, but I got a little overzealous with the blue marker, so she ended up in a blue outfit. I started out with B39 and added that in the darkest areas on her blouse, particularly down the sides of her waist and then around the seams of the sleeves. Then on the apron, I concentrated the dark pretty close to where the apron cinches around her waist. And then I followed the lines that are the stamped lines with that darkest marker and just did quick little what's that called? A flicking motion. Ugh, tongue-tied today. Anyway, after the B39, I came in with B37 and blended that out just a little bit. And then for the top of her apron, to lighten it up so that there was, some contrast between her apron and her blouse, I used B45 and B41. Next, I moved on to her hair, and I started with E39. And her hair is drawn in so it appears to be wavy or curly. So I didn't do the normal flicking motion. I actually did scumbling, which is a fancy word for drawing scribbly lines. And I did it very sporadic. I made sure to leave a lot of white space so that I could fill in with other colors to give her hair a lot of texture. The second color that I came in with was E49, and that's actually the darkest. So I did concentrate that around the part in her hair and then down where her hair would be kind of behind her neck, so on either side of her neck that's actually drawn in. Then I came in with E37 and just did more of those little scribbly lines and decided to add in some highlights with YR23. And then I blended all of that together with E31. And when I blended it, I didn't scrub over it a lot. I just did quick swipes just to fill in some of the leftover white space and to soften up some of the harsher lines that were in there. Next, I moved on to all of the little elements that I'm going to color in with gray markers. The gray markers that I used are C3, C1, and N0. And I typically always start with my darkest colors, especially with the grays, because they do blend very nicely together. And I concentrated the shadows on the outer edges of these objects. So for the cup that she's the tall, which I turned it into a strawberry shake. So the strawberry shake cup, I concentrated the C3 closest to the side of her head. For the espresso machine, I concentrated on the outer edges. And for the standalone cup, again, on the outer edges. Then I brought in the C1 to blend that out a little bit and then filled the rest in with the N0. So for all of the pink elements, the strawberry shake, the cake plate, the cups on top of the espresso machine, I started with RV10 and decided that was a little bit too light. So I moved in with RV23 and blended that out with RV11. A lot of these little images are little. I just said little images. So yes, they are little images. So you can very easily get away with a simple two-color blend. There's not a lot of real estate, and just having colors that are far enough away from each other, you'll still get some shadows, you'll still get some of that contrast or dimension that you're looking for. For the whipped cream on the strawberry shake, I did E50 as well as the frosting on the cake, and then the whipped cream on the standalone cup, which I come back and realize that I forgot to color it, so I'll color that later. Then I moved on to the chocolate cake and the cupcake. So for that I used, what did I use for that? For the cake, I started with E37 and concentrated that on the outer edges again and blended that out with E34. Trying to keep a center highlight on, I was trying to keep a center highlight on all of the images. For the little cupcake wrapper, I did RV23 and RV11, and then I used the same colors for the chocolate cupcake and R29 for the cherry on top of the cupcake. So after I had all of those little images colored, I decided that I wanted to have some art hanging on the wall of my little coffee shop. So I die cut some cardstock, and for this I used Neenah Classic Crest 80 pound using the Cloudy Frames dies from Pink and Maine. I really like these dies because it does cut out the centerpiece and then it leaves you a cute little scallopy frame. So for the art on the wall, I decided to have the two tall shake dessert type drinks and then the little coffee cup. And for those, I used RV23 and RV11. Again, really very simple coloring because these images are really tiny. For the whipped cream on all of them, I used E50. And once I was done with that, I brought in the frames that are going to go around these images and used the B, because it's blue. I used my B37 marker and just colored over those frames. And I did make sure to go around the outer edges with the tip of the marker as well as inside the frame with the tip of the marker, just to get rid of that white so it looked like it was a blue frame all the way through. After I was done coloring the images for the framed pictures, I moved on to the counter and I started with E34 and I colored the top and the bottom of that with the lightest color, and then for the center strip going along the top of the counter as well as the bottom, I used E39 for that. I wanted it to be a wood counter and I wanted to have it have some dimension. Now, Callie Latavola and Courtney Kreber are the masters at adding in wood grain. Me, not so much. So I'm going to show you a little trick that I came up with so that I could still add in that wood grain appearance. The third color that I'm using right now is E37, and I just did tiny little flick marks, kind of going from the bottom up and then again from the top down. And being left-handed, I thought I would throw this in here as well. Being left-handed, it's much easier for me to flick away from myself. For whatever reason, I have a hard time lightening up the pressure if I pull it towards myself. So if you're left-handed and you have a hard time pulling a marker towards yourself and lightening up that stroke, try flicking away from yourself and see if that helps a little bit. Anyway, back to the coloring, I came in with E35 and filled in the rest of the front part of the counter. I'm going to make it a dessert case so that there's a little bit of a window opening there. Anyway, I colored in the frame with the E39, I think. If I didn't, it'll be listed in the description below. I'm pretty sure it was E39. Then I came in with E49 to darken up around that frame so that it would stand out a little bit more. I colored in the display case with E31 because it would have that back. It wouldn't be completely see-through. Then I continue working on the sides of the countertop because I thought that the E35 was just a little bit too light and I needed to bring some darker colors in, and then blended that out a little bit more. So to get my wood grain, all I did was use a fine tip brown marker that I have had for, I kid you not, 19 years. I've had this pen and it still has ink in it somehow. I find that to be incredibly amazing that it still works. And I just did kind of uneven scribbly lines down the wider planks on the counter just to get that wood grain look. So once I was done coloring the counter, I fussy cut all of the images and started to put my card together. I adhered my brick wall to a piece of navy blue cardstock that I had run through my Gemini Junior machine with a scalloped rectangle die. And to make sure that it stuck down really well, I did put an acrylic block on top of that, mostly because the paper warped a little bit because of the texture paste. I used a little bit of glue on the bottom of the barista and adhered her to the back side of the counter. Then I put my little desserts into the little display window of the counter, and I'm using liquid glue for all of these to make sure that they stay put. Next, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get the little espresso machine to stick on top of that counter. And I'm also trying to figure out how I'm going to get that standalone coffee cup to stick. And I thought it would probably be better just to put all the foam tape on the back of the counter and the barista first. I did want her to be popped up and be kind of away from the wall, more in front of the brick wall. So after I put a bunch of foam tape on the back of that, I decided that I was going to put foam tape on the little espresso machine, and I made sure to put it up higher, not down, flush with the bottom. And I did the same thing with the standalone coffee cup. I put it up higher. I made sure to put the foam tape up higher so that I could put liquid glue on the bottom of those to stick them to the top of the counter. Next, I adhered the brick wall panel to the front of a top folding A2 size note card, which is, my card bases are always 80-pound Neenah Classic Crest cardstock. And I placed the counter and the barista on the front of the card just so I could use it as a guide for placement for my little art that I'm going to hang up on the wall. And being that I did use that Ranger texture paste, I wanted to make sure that I used liquid glue to hold those frames in place, because obviously the surface is lumpy, so using liquid glue will ensure that it sticks well to the texture paste, as well as it'll kind of grab onto the areas that are recessed. So I arranged the frames and glued those down first, and then I used, again, liquid glue to put my art within the frames. Once I had those in place, I remove all of the release paper from the foam tape on the back of the counter and the barista and press that into place. Then I add a little bit of liquid glue to the bottom of the espresso machine and the standalone coffee cup and glue those into place. And then I come in with a white gel pen just to add a few highlights on the straw for the shake, one of the shakes that's hanging up on the wall. And I did a little bit of and I did a few highlights on the cupcakes that are in the display case. And then for the cake, there are, it looks like cherries on top of the cake, or it might be decorative whipped cream, but guess what? I turned them into cherries. But since I had stamped the image in black ink, I went over those cherries with my white gel pen first. And I kind of let it settle just a little bit. And then I dabbed the top of that with some red stickles because I don't have any of the Nouveau drops in red. So my cake is going to have glittery cherries, but that's okay. I still think it turned out really cute. Anyway, that's it. That finishes up my card for today. I encourage you to check out nottoshabbyshop.com. She's got a great variety of products there for you. Don't forget there's a coupon code listed in the description box below for you to save 10% on your order. And also I'll have all of the products that I used and the Copic colors that I used. Thanks again for stopping by. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.